So he's like, I see these people, they're downtrodden, the flock. I see them, and people are setting them up for slaughter. Like, I'll get rid of them. I'm just going to take money for them. They're worthless to me. And then he comes in and he shepherds them. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is the lowest of the flock. I'm going to come in. I'm going to lift them up, and I'm going to be their shepherd. And I've got two staffs. I've got the staff of union and the staff of favor, which, keeping everything together and then giving a whole bunch of blessings, right? Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I am reading through the Bible in 365 days using the chronological Bible reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com, which you would go on, you would download your free reading plan under chronological reading plans, and you would download free and you would read along using your own Bible. So today is day 257. It is September 13th, and the reading today is Zechariah 9 through 14. So we're actually going to finish Zechariah today, and I haven't really made a lot of announcements in the recent past about all the books that we have finished because we've done so many. And like in the very beginning, I was excited once we finished one, but we're kind of like knocking all of these out of the park. But so we're making these huge strides towards completing our Bible. We're more than 9 months in, which means we have less than a third left of the Bible, which is really exciting. So if you have never been here before, I always encourage you to listen first for as much as you can kind of handle, as much you're interested in, and then go all the way back to the beginning and start from day one, so fresh, build your foundation and work your way all the way back through. For those who are not really ready for that, or for those who even still need a little bit of a refresher, I'm going to do a 2-minute history from what we have done so far. Before I do that, I'm actually doing a quick time check, which I used to do with you guys in the middle of summer. It is 7:15 and look how dark it is. I'm so sad. So, but it's almost fall and time is gonna get darker really early. So it is what it is. Some days I'm better with it and some days I'm not. So, okay, this is the time of Zechariah. I'm going to call it the time of the prophets. It's in the 500 BCs. So the nation of Israel was created long ago. Adam and Eve first were created by the Lord, right? Two people that were created. They sinned. They broke kind of the one and only command that the Lord had. And because they broke that, they from then on, we sin continually. We turn away from the Lord. And I don't know if I want to say if it's our nature to turn away from the Lord. Maybe it was our nature before that and they just broke it. I'm not sure about all of those details, but what I know is that we are always falling short and we are always turning away from the Lord. A lot of that had to do with the very beginning when the world broke. So now there's a lot of things in the world that really aren't doing the things that they were supposed to be doing. There's thorns that grow up and things are much harder and we have to work harder. And so all of these other things. And then they were banished from the Garden of Eden. And then they had multiple generations of people. And then Noah was righteous. And so he was the only one. Everybody else was sort of a mess. And so the Lord destroyed almost everyone in the world, except for these small amount of families. They recreated, they built back up again. And then once they built back up again, the Lord made a covenant with one of them, who then made a covenant with his son. And then they made a covenant with his son. And then they made a covenant with these 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel moved into the nation of Egypt because there was a famine in their land. And then they started really taking on a lot of the properties of the Egyptians. They stopped following their God as closely, and they were following the God of the Egyptians. They weren't following the maker and the creator of the universe, who chose these guys as a people group. So after they were oppressed for such a long amount of time, like 400 years, give or take, they cried out to the Lord. The Lord then saved them, right? He was their salvation. He saved this people group, made them a people group, gave them laws, rules, and restrictions, and also blessings. And then he brought them into a land that wasn't their own. It was a land that was sort of created by him, by people that were not his own. And that made it a beautiful land. It was a beautiful place to live. And he moved those people into that land. And from there on, they kept turning away from the Lord, and then they would cry out to the Lord because bad things would happen. And then they would turn back, and this was this perpetual cycle. And then here we are. And I mean, it's really this chain of 1,000 years after that. And then here we are in the 500s. There was this great sort of mass destruction of the Israelites. Babylon came in and took over all of Israel. They were no longer their own people group. And for 70 years, they were banished to other areas. And then King Cyrus allowed them and even encouraged them to go back to their native land of Israel. And that's where we are now. They are supposed to be rebuilding the temple. They came with Zerubbabel, who was a descendant of David, who was their governor. They came with Joshua, who was a descendant of Aaron, who was a high priest. And they came with several prophets and other people that were sort of like commanders and elders and things like that sort of lifted up and brought the people together. And this is one of the prophets. Zechariah is one of the prophets that came from exile and is now living in the nation of Jerusalem. And we've seen a lot happen in Zechariah. So there's your history. We've seen a lot happen in Zechariah. He was letting them know. So they had come back and built the foundation, but they didn't continue to build. They once again turned to themselves, did what they wanted, and then and forgot the Lord. And just kind of like put him off to the side. It's not like they acted like he didn't exist. They just put him off to the side because other things were more important. And so again, he was really frustrated, and he was like, "There's going to be famine in your land, and there's going to be your crops aren't going to grow. I guess that's part of famine, and things are not going to go well for you. There's not going to be rain and things like that." And then this next generation was now in charge of building up the temple. That's a lot of where Zechariah comes in. So we are now down into Zechariah 9. Okay, so in Zechariah 9, it looks like there's a prophecy once again against all the other nations around. So the Lord has said, okay, I'm lifting you up again. The generation before you didn't do what they were supposed to do, but now I am lifting you up. I am asking you to stick with me. I'm asking you to have faith in me, to love me, to do the things I ask you to do, like love on your neighbor and provide for the widows and the poor and all of these other things, right? So he's asking this generation to do that. And because he's protecting this generation, everyone else around them is a threat to them. And so once again, he's going, I'm going to destroy all of these areas because you're all coming up against my people. And I don't like that. And so you're going to kind of get my wrath because my nation, Israel, is going to be building a temple for me. So some of the things that he says are, so he has a prophecy in verse 1, and he says, the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, of Damascus, Hamath, Tyre, Sidon, right? And then it says, but the Lord will take away these possessions and destroy her power on the sea. This is Tyre and Sidon. Ashkelon, Gaza, Ashdod, Philistines. And then he says, those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah. So I'm kind of going to punish all these other people, but some of the people that are left are going to come into Judah, and they're going to become a clan in there. And he says, but I will encamp my temple to guard it against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, because now I'm keeping watch. So nobody's going to come in and mess with my temple anymore. And then he moves on. And he says, rejoice greatly, Zion. He says, see, your king comes to you. So now we're taking a little bit of a turn. So this seems like it's a future prophecy. He says, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious. So the king is coming. Right now, they only have a governor. They do not have a king. So he says to this nation of people, your king is coming. He's righteous, which is something that they're always looking for in somebody in the Lord. David was righteous. He's righteous. He's victorious, which means he's winning whatever it is he's doing. Lowly and riding on a donkey. So he's not he's not something someone would expect, right? As somebody that would be a king. He's lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So like, it's not even a donkey. It's less than it, right? It's the sort of the young version of it. So it's less than a donkey. And that's what he's going to be coming in on. So he's going to be lowly. It's going to be a little bit humble, right? And he says, now he's going to then take away the chariots of Ephraim. So then there's going to be some sort of peace in the land. Once he comes, right, this lowly king, there's going to be peace in the land. It says his rule is going to extend from sea to sea. He's going to proclaim peace in the nations. And as for you, the people of Israel, because of the blood covenant with you, I'm going to free your prisoners from the waterless pit. So once this king comes, there's going to be freedom for you guys, right? Return to your fortress, you prisoners. And then he says, I will bend Judah as I bend my bow and fill it with Ephraim. I'm going to rouse your son Zion against your son's Greece. So now it's going to be the people of Judah against the people of Greece. So there's going to be peace in the land of Israel. And then they can go against other countries because they have peace with each other. And I'm pointing this out because there hasn't been peace in the land of Israel. Like, they haven't been unified for hundreds of years. They've been a split kingdom since Solomon, right after Solomon's reign. But even before that, like when Saul and David were sort of battling for the throne, they were split. There were people that were on King David's side, and then there were people that were on Saul's side. And so the nation, very, very small amount of time, like as soon as Joshua came over, they kind of sort of came together. And then when David ultimately ruled and Saul had died, they were joined together for some time. But there are always little pieces that were always breaking off. And so now when this new king comes, they're once again going to be united all together under one banner. And then they, under that banner, are going to be able to go out, right, and be against other nations that are against them. And so that's where we find them here. It says, then the Lord is going to appear over them, these sons, right? The sovereign Lord is going to sound the trumpet. He's going to march in the storms of the south, and the Lord Almighty will shield them. So now collectively, they're all going to be protected from these other nations. And then he says how attractive and beautiful they're going to be. And then the Lord is going to restore them. So going right into 10:1, it says, ask the Lord for rain in the springtime, the Lord who sends the thunderstorms. So now you've come together, right? You've done what the Lord has asked you to do. And he is going to make the land prosperous again. The gardens are going to grow. You're going to have more kids, right? There's going to be jobs. The soil is going to be fertile, right? People are not going to speak deceitfully. In verse 3, he says, the idols speak deceitfully. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep. So first he's giving all these things, and then they're starting to get all these false prophecies. And then he says, my anger burns against them. So once again, it looks like the leaders are turning them away. So they come together, and now they're turning back away again. So he says that the leaders are kind of giving them false visions and giving them untruths. And he says, and he's going to come in and he's going to punish the leaders because the Almighty is going to care for his flock. I think we see this vision again. And I feel like he's talked about this vision before, where like the people, the human, can't seem to get it right. And so he sends himself to do this. Now he is the one. Now we're all supposed to be following him. The Israelites at the time were all supposed to be following him. We now, as followers of Jesus, are all supposed to be following him. Because people, unfortunately, like I talked about in the beginning of the history, we have a way of turning ourselves away from the Lord, right? It's so easy to get something wrong and to kind of shift in that direction. Like one of the things that I'm in some ways against is like a solid doctrine. Like there's the doctrine of this or the doctrine of that, and we've gone to many different churches at this point, all slightly different denominations, and they each have a doctrine, right? That might be slightly different. That's why there's a different denomination. And sometimes when we follow that doctrine, instead of going back and really trying to see what the word says, we can get really easily steered off base. I'm not saying it always happens, by the way, but I'm just saying it's easy to go off and to sort of fall into the doctrine and away from scripture, because sometimes we just go, oh, that's true. And then therefore, if that's true, then this must be true. And then the next step is if that's true, then that must be true, right? And so sometimes we forget. And it's just like this. It's easy to float off, of course. And so he's saying, in my mind, he's saying, these leaders are steering you wrong. I don't think in my mind, it doesn't seem to be deliberate, but the leaders are steering you wrong. And because they are steering you wrong, there's going to be punishment for them because they're steering you wrong. And because of that, then I need to be the leader. I need to be the shepherd. That's the Lord, not me personally. Because he says, my anger burns against them. I'm going to punish them. The Lord is going to care for his flock. And then he says in verse 5, it said 4, it says, from Judah will come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, and from him every ruler. So this is all coming from Judah. The cornerstone, and this is in my mind, right? This is what I think to myself, like, what are these things? Why is it important? The cornerstone, it's the thing that builds the rest of the thing, right? Without the cornerstone, that building is falling over. So this is like the center, your measuring line or your plumb line, right? Like this is the most important thing that you have in there. This is the thing that keeps everything centered. And then the tent peg, I think, is like shelter, right? So this is the thing that's going to shelter you, protect you. And then the battle bow, obviously the thing that's going to lead you in battle, the thing that's going to make you strong. And then every ruler, that's going to lead. And so I think every one of those things is going to be coming from Judah. Now, is it 4 different things? I don't know. Is it one person is going to do all of these things? Very possible, right? We might be able to see that. So it says, then together, so all of these things together, they're going to be like a warrior's battle, trampling their enemies. So all of these things are going to come in strong and be able to take over everything. And then it says, I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph. Now I'm feeling like it's talking about people groups, because he's strengthening Judah. He's strengthening the tribes of Joseph, which are like Ephraim and Manasseh. He says the Ephraimites are going to become like warriors. He's going to redeem them. They're going to be as numerous as before. And he says he's going to bring them all back. So slowly from Egypt and Assyria and all over, he's going to bring them all back. And there's going to be massive amounts of them. So they're going to be huge. He says Assyria's pride is going to be brought down and Egypt's scepter will pass away. I'm going to strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely. Moving on to the next chapter, it says, open your doors, Lebanon, so that fire can devour your cedars. So he's calling down in other places, right? Like, you're all going to lose all your stuff, and I'm going to bring all of Israel together, and they're going to be as one. Moving down into Zechariah 11, it says, this is what the Lord my God says. Shepherd the flock marked for slaughter. Their buyers slaughter them and go unpunished. Those who sell them say, praise the Lord, I am rich. Okay, I had to light it up because it was getting so dark out here. Okay, so this is a little hairy. This because I'm going to say it feels like the Lord might be talking to himself, but he might be talking to Zechariah. So it's really interesting to me. Okay, so it says, this is what they say: shepherd the flock that is for slaughter. So it looks like they're abusing the lowest of them, right? So they're saying like, oh, I'm just going to give these sheep away. Who cares? And I'm going to get money for them, right? I'm going to profit off of them. So they're abusing the weak. He says, praise the Lord, I'm rich. And it says, their own shepherds didn't spare them, for I will no longer have pity on the people of the land, he says. I will give everyone into the hands of their neighbors and their king, and then I'm going to devour the land. And it's because the shepherds are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I feel like I always say that. I'm a broken record. So I shepherded the flock marked for slaughter. So I think when he's saying I don't think it's Zechariah saying I. I think the Lord is saying I. But it goes back and forth. So it could be Zechariah. It could be the Lord. So just bear with it. I'm going to say right now, I'm assuming it's the Lord saying it about himself. That's how I'm going to talk about it. So that's the kind of the way in which I'm going to talk. So he says, I shepherded the flock marked for slaughter, the Lord, particularly the oppressed. And then I took 2 staffs, one called favor and one called union. And then it said, but the flock detested me. And the reason I'm saying this sounds like the Lord is because this sounds like the people of Israel, right? So he's like, I see these people, they're downtrodden, the flock. I see them, and people are setting them up for slaughter. Like, I'll get rid of them. I'm just going to take money for them. They're worthless to me. And then he comes in and he shepherds them. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is the lowest of the flock. I'm going to come in. I'm going to lift them up, and I'm going to be their shepherd. And I've got 2 staffs. I've got the staff of union and the staff of favor, which, keeping everything together and then giving a whole bunch of blessings, right? That's what these 2 things are going to do. And he says, but they detested me. So they didn't even honor him and glorify him, be excited that he was deciding to shepherd them. And even though they were going to be sold. So he said, they detested me. I grew weary of them. And he said, I'm not going to be your shepherd anymore. And then I took my staff called favor and I broke it. So now they are no longer getting favor. This flock is no longer getting any blessings or any favor. I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, you can keep it. But they did give him pay. They gave him 30 pieces of silver. I think that this is not the right price. So I'm not sure, but it looks as if this is that they gave him money, but they didn't really give him what he deserved, right? Because after that, he's still irritated. So then the Lord says, throw it to the potter. Like, it doesn't even seem to be worth it. So throw that money to the potter. And then it said, then I broke my second staff, breaking the family bond between Judah and Israel. And that's what happened, right? So Judah and Israel were supposed to be together and they weren't. They wound up breaking. So he says, then the Lord says to me, take again the equipment of a foolish shepherd, because I'm going to raise up a shepherd over this land who will not care for the lost or seek the young. So he's going to bring in a bad shepherd, because of what they've done. He's bringing in a bad shepherd, and he says, woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm and his right eye. So he's coming in. The Lord went and healed him. Then he sent a shepherd who was going to just let them be destroyed. And then that shepherd gets destroyed, right? Then that shepherd, the sword comes against that shepherd, which again, I feel like is something that we've seen. It may happen again, but it's something we've definitely seen happen in the past to them. Then we come down to Zechariah 12 and we have another prophecy. It says, the Lord who stretches out the heavens, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. So Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. So now people are going to come up against him. Again, these are things that I'm going to say have happened. So it looks like they're going to happen again. So there's going to be a siege. There's going to be a hold on them, just like they were before at war. It says, then the clans of Judah are going to say in their hearts, the people of Jerusalem are strong because the Lord Almighty is there. So they're going to lean on the Lord. On that day, I'm going to make the clans of Judah like a fire pot and a wood pile. They're going to consume all the surrounding peoples. So because they leaned on me, then I'm going to allow them to be like a consuming fire, consuming everything in the area. The Lord is going to save the dwellings of Judah first, and then save the temple of the Lord. And then it says, and I'm going to pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace, and I have supplication, which is like, it says like begging, right? Like supplication, like you're begging for something from people. So he's going to give this a spirit of supplication and grace. They're going to look on me, the one who has been pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns an only child. Again, these pronouns are getting funky, right? It says me, then it says him. The spirit that he sends of grace, is that a person that he's sending? And then something pierces him, pierces his heart, pierces his, right? Something pierces him. And then when he gets pierced, they're going to be mourning because of that, because he was this grace, right? Like, so he brought them grace and supplication, and then he got pierced. And then because he got pierced, they were mourning. This is what I'm thinking it looks like. And it says, then the land will mourn. And then it says, the house of David and their wives will mourn. The house of Nathan and his wives will mourn. And the clan of Levi and their wives. I should say Nathan and their wives, not his wives. It's the clan. And then the clan of the house of Levi will mourn. So David, the house of David, the king, right? Nathan is the prophet from way back when. So the prophets will mourn. And then the high priests, right? The Levites and all the priests. So those three will mourn. So these are going to see, these people groups are going to be the ones that are mourning. The king, right? So we see everybody fulfilling that, the prophets and the priests. All right. And then we're moving down to this fountain of cleansing. And we just keep getting prophecy after prophecy. So I hope you guys are getting through this. On that day, so this day of mourning, he keeps talking about that day. Is it exactly one day? But we might find out. On that day, a fountain will be opened in the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity. Again, is a fountain a literal fountain, or is it something or someone? Right? So this fountain is going to be opened and it's going to cleanse them from sin and impurity. On that day, I'm going to banish all the idols from the land. And then it says, I will remove both the prophets and the spirit of impurity from the land. The prophets must die because they tell lies in their name. So there is going to come a time where this fountain is going to come. And once the fountain has come, all the sins and impurities are gone and the prophecies are gone. That's why there's no prophets. There's no prophets because there's no prophecy. There's no prophecy because everything is turned towards the Lord and all the sins and impurities are gone. Right? So we'll no longer need prophets because there's going to be no longer, right? The Lord doesn't have to say, hey, turn back to me, because they are. They're all turned towards him. This is like the end, so to speak, right? And so if somebody comes and says the Lord said this, they're lying. No one's going to want to do that because there is no prophecy, because the Lord is no longer speaking to them because all of this stuff has been cleaned, right? So the Lord is no longer crying out to them to turn back to the Lord because they're with him. So we're not going to see any of those prophecies. So we're not going to see any of those prophets. And of course, I'm going to say that time has not come yet. So there's going to be a time where this comes. Maybe, right? Possibly. I kind of always keep that open. One of these things I wanted to note, it says, on that day, every prophet is going to be ashamed of their prophetic visions. They will not put on a prophet's garment of hair in order to deceive. Each will, it says, and they also, someone will say, if someone asks, what are these wounds on your body? They're going to answer, the wounds I have given at the house of my friends. So no, everyone like is going to lie. Like, so I wanted to look at these two things, garment of hair and wounds on body, because we haven't seen too much of this, but there have been like little snippets. And so a lot of this would be traditions that were passed down, right? So we wouldn't necessarily, like, it doesn't say, hey, all prophets need to wear a garment of hair. All prophets should be cutting, right? Like, or making a mark on themselves in some way. But what we do know from some of the, just the little inklings at what we do know, what we maybe understand from some of the inklings of things that we've seen, is in general, going back to Elijah, the prophets would wear a garment of hair. So maybe once they realized that they were a prophet, or anyone who was in the family of those that were prophesying, right, they would wear a garment of hair. And it would make sense, because then therefore people would know that they were the prophets, right? It wouldn't just be somebody shouting off the street. They would actually look a certain way. And then they would also mark themselves. And so we would see that they would be marked because of their prophecies, and then they would be wearing a garment of hair because they are prophets. And so we see this obviously coming in the future. We're going to see this as well. But it says, once all that is done, we're not going to see that anymore. So you're not going to see anyone. And if you see someone, they're going to be like, oh, that's from something else. That's not from being a prophet, right? Because all prophets will be gone. All right, moving down to Zechariah 13:7, it says, awake, sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is close to me. So he's bringing this fountain in. He's bringing this, all these things up here that we saw before, that all of Judah is, right? We're bringing all these things in. And then it seems like we're having the sword come against that shepherd. So the shepherd is coming in and doing all of these things for the people of Israel. And then it looks like the sword is coming up against him. So he says, awake, sword, strike the shepherd. So there's going to be death for the shepherd in here. In the whole land, 2/3 are going to be struck down and perish. 1/3 is going to be left. 1/3 I'm going to put into the fire, and I'm going to refine them. So those that are left, that are still sort of seeking the Lord, right, that are still looking towards the Lord, they're going to be refined in this, whatever this is. And then he says, I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God. So it looks like there's something more that has to happen, more than just the sins being forgiven or, right, being cleansed. Maybe this is part of that whole cleansing process that he talked about earlier. And again, I want to leave off with, some of these are very confusing, and I'm no expert. I'm just going off of what I'm reading and what I've been piecing together through all the things that I've seen. So there's probably a lot of depth, more depth to some of these things. And so I want to just be very careful that I don't want to go, clearly it says, right? Like we were at a place today where he was like, clearly this is end times, and clearly that's end times, and clear, right? And I want to be very, very careful of that, because that's how the Pharisees got really messed up, where they were like, clearly it's supposed to be this, and it wasn't that, right? So I think we want to keep these things a little bit open in our hands, and just kind of try and understand what they might mean and what they might have meant to these people. Anyway, I say that again, I'm always like such a broken record. All right, so moving into this last one, Zechariah 14, it says, the day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. So it sounded like good stuff was happening, and then our shepherd dies, and then it looks like it's not going to be so great after that. So it says half the city is going to go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Then it says, on that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives are going to be split in two from east to west. So again, we got a vision. Crazy stuff is happening in Jerusalem. There's going to be a day, and the mountain is going to split, and some people are going to go through it, right? And you just need to be aware of where you're going. Like, so it says, you will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days, right? So you're going to be running, and you're going to be running towards this. On that day, there's going to be neither sunlight nor cold. So everyone's going to be scared. It's going to be dark. They're not going to be able to distinguish day from night. There's going to be no distinction. And it says, on that day, living water is going to flow out from Jerusalem, half of it east to the Dead Sea and half of it to the Mediterranean. Summer and winter are going to be the same, right? And his name is it says, on that day, there will be one Lord, and his name the only name. I feel like whatever's going to happen, it's going to be big enough that we're going to understand that it's wacky, that right, it's not going to be like, oh, there's an earthquake. right? It's going to be something big enough that maybe not everyone's going to understand, but the people who are looking toward the Lord are going to say, this isn't normal. This isn't right. Something is happening. And they're going to be looking towards the Lord, right? They're going to be looking towards that, expecting something to happen. It says Jerusalem is going to be raised up high from the Benjamin gates, right? From all of the gates. Then there's going to be a plague on all of the nations that the Lord is going to strike against anyone who is against Jerusalem. It says, then they're going to seize each other by the hand and attack one another. Judah, too, will fight in Jerusalem. So there's going to be fighting. Plagues are going to strike up in the horses and the mules. It says, then the survivors from all the nations that attack Jerusalem are going to go to the Lord. So things are going to fall apart in big deals. And then those that are left are going to turn towards the Lord. Remember, this is always what the Lord is trying to do for his people. He's always trying, and by his people, I don't mean just Israel. I mean the people that he created, the world that he created. He is always trying to get us to turn towards him. So everything he does is an effort to get the people to open their eyes and look towards the Lord and stop looking towards themselves or stop looking towards some kind of false god, right? It's always to try and get us to see who he is. It says, on that day, holy to the Lord will be inscribed on the bells of the horses, and the cooking pots and the Lord's house will be like the sacred bowls in front of the altar, right? And on that day, there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord Almighty. So everything, everyone that's there is going to be appealing to the Lord, turning towards the Lord, whoever they might be, right? And anyone that is not for the Lord is not going to be there. That's how we end today. And that's how Zechariah ends. So that's the end of all of his visions. We're going to be going into Ezra tomorrow, and Ezra we've seen a little bit before, but we're sticking in prophecies. And so I hope you guys have been able to stick with it. I know prophecies are really rich and somewhat difficult. And so I hope you've been able to read through them. If this has been a blessing to you, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I want you to keep reading. I will see you guys next time.